Okay, we're briefly going to be going over, you have a lesson coming up that's going to be going over the scientific method. So I thought people seem to get confused on this for some reason, and so I thought maybe it would kind of help if we kind of take a look at it before you actually get into your lesson on it. Now let's look at some of the, when you go down here, you have some vocabulary words here. Um, a controlled experiment. Let's look at hypothesis first. A hypothesis is an educated guess. When you make a hypothesis, you're not just making a statement that has no recent knowledge that you're incorporating into making that statement. It's maybe some research that you've done, things that you've learned in the past. You can actually make a pretty good educated guess. It may not be correct, and that's okay. But based on, just in general, what you've learned, what you've read, what you've studied, when you make a hypothesis, you're making a pretty good guess about, or it's an explanation about something specific that happened. So hypothesis, one of your words, a controlled experiment is where we test a hypothesis. Maybe we came up with a good hypothesis, remember, an educated guess. And when you do the testing, you only want to test one variable. So you're not testing several things dealing with the particular situation. You have one thing that you're going to test for, and that's called a controlled experiment. Now, the scientific method is the method that scientists use to do experiments, So maybe they have a problem that they're going to test to see if they can find the solution for, some problem they've come up with. And so they actually use, it's a very organized, there are 5 steps in it, a very organized method of testing to determine what the result is or what the answer to their problem is. So we call that the scientific method, a very organized way of going through and testing something to find out what an answer is. So as we come down through, it says, what is the scientific method? And also I'm going to be putting a short animation. It's going to be along with your lesson that will help you to understand the scientific method too. So the scientific method, let's see, I have a couple questions on it here. So here they go through the steps of the scientific method. So the first thing that you normally do, or a scientist normally does, is that they've made an observation about something. Maybe good example would be, what if I'm visiting a friend, I'm sitting in the backyard, and I notice that there are 2 hummingbird feeders, one red one and one blue one. And it looks like to me, as I sit there staring at it, that the hummingbirds seem to be attracted more to the red color. So I'm observing that. So then that kind of makes me want to do, maybe, is there anything I can do to kind of figure out if the hummingbirds are indeed attracted to that red color? So after observing that, I can define the problem. I want to get an answer to if they are indeed attracted to the red color. What people normally do is you do a little bit of research then. You have a great question, but you want to go back and see, rather than maybe, you could certainly do the experiment yourself, and many times we do that. But in the real world, you go and you look to see if anybody else has done any experiments to test the same thing that I'm wondering about. And you read up on it, because, if many other people have already tested and done experiments that show, yes, hummingbirds are indeed attracted to the red color, then I could certainly either do my experiment, or I could just say, well, I've got the answer to my question here. So it's always good to do a little bit of research. Now, once I've done that, and you'll be reading through here, make an observation, define the problem, research the problem, I'm going to want to form a hypothesis. Remember that hypothesis is a educated guess. So, I've looked at those, I was thinking back at what I was seeing in the yard. And so I'm going to hypothesize that because I saw them all going to the red hummingbird feeder, I'm going to make the educated guess or hypothesis that hummingbirds are indeed attracted to the color red. That's a pretty good guess. I saw that they were coming down. I don't definitively know that it was the color that they were attracted to, but that's what I'm going to test for. So I've come up with my hypothesis that hummingbirds are attracted to the color red. I think they were. And so how am I going to test to see if indeed they were attracted to the color red and maybe not something else? Because remember, just because they were going to the red hummingbird feeder doesn't necessarily mean they were attracted to red. It appeared to be so, but what if there were two different types of food, hummingbird food, that were in the two different feeders? Maybe they liked the one better that was in the red. Or maybe somebody had touched the, in putting up the hummingbird feeders, maybe they were put up at different times, and when the person had put up the red one, he had stuff on his hands, maybe some sweet type of, it could have been honey or something, maybe he had his hands in honey. This is pretty far out, but it kind of gives you a good idea as to what could be going on. And so he touched that red hummingbird feeder and he got some of the honey onto the hummingbird feeder. And so really it's not the color, it's not the food, it's that they're attracted to the scent of whatever the remnants of what were on the fingers that's now on the hummingbird feeder. Maybe that's why they're attracted to that particular one. So you can see there could be many, many things. So just because I see something and it appears to be so doesn't mean that it is so. So that's why we want to do an experiment. So the next step would be to got the hypothesis, and they ask you a couple questions on it. Let's see. We want to actually design an experiment. So what I would do when I design an experiment, I want to make sure that I only have one variable. So I'm going to set up some hummingbird feeders. I'm going to make them all identical. I'm going to make sure they're all washed on the outside so they're all exactly the same as far as what's on the outside of the hummingbird feeder. I'm going to put into the hummingbird feeders all of the same food. Everything, I'm going to put them right hanging on the same tree, right near each other. I'm going to do everything that would, to the best of my ability, would make those hummingbird feeders exactly the same, except I'm going to make one red. Maybe I'll make another one blue. Maybe I'll make another one yellow, and maybe I'll make another one green. That way, if I see, and I'll be monitoring to see how much food when I'll put it all at the same level. I'll monitor how much hummingbird food is in there daily. I may take videos. I might sit out there and monitor how many birds I see coming to each one. I'll document all of that. That's all called my data. I'll probably want to do that for a week or two. So I'll have a lot of data to actually try and come up with a good conclusion. Remember that the data that you collect, it has to be something that's observable. You have to be able to see it. As far as the scientific method, it has to be something that's measurable. So I can measure, maybe I can count within a reasonable period of time how many birds came up, how many went to the red bird feeder. I can measure the amount of food that's, as it's going down in each of the hummingbird feeders. So it's observable, it's very measurable. I can actually repeat the experiment. An experiment needs to be something that somebody else can repeat to verify your results if they so choose. Or you may want to repeat it. And it also has to be falsifiable. If for some reason it wasn't the red color that was attracting the hummingbirds, maybe it was something else. So I have the possibility of falsifying my hypothesis. When I do my experiment, I collect my data. Remember, maybe it comes up, nope, the red did not attract more hummingbirds than the other colors did. But the neat thing about an experiment is that there's no bad result. You could be disappointed in the result, that it isn't what you thought it was going to be. But the thing is, no experiment's a failure because you will figure out something. It may not be what you thought it was going to be, but it'll be something else factual. So there's no bad experiment, and because you get an answer different from what your hypothesis was does not mean that you failed in any regard. It just shows you that something else was a fact and not what you thought it was. So another example, and so you go through that, here, and you'll have some questions on it. And there's the interpreting the result. So once you've gathered your data, you'll want to you draw a conclusion. The conclusion could be, as I said, it could be, yep, red colored feeders do attract more hummingbirds. Or it could be, no, from my experiments, my results that I've collected, through gathering my data, I can see that red colors do not attract hummingbirds more. So either they did or they didn't. Both are a good answer. Both would be factual answers and make your experiment a success because you come up with a factual truth. So let's see what else. They got some questions on it. Now here again they talk about it being, whatever you set up for your experiment needs to be observable, it has to be measurable, you have to be able to repeat it, and it should be falsifiable. Okay. So another example of a scientific experiment that I'm going to actually ask you a question on. What if I have two plants in my home? One's in a bedroom that I sleep during the day, so I have to put up aluminum foil on the windows so it's dark in the room. And I have a plant in there, and I'm noticing, boy, that plant is not looking very good. It's not growing. The leaves are not a nice, rich green color. It looks really like a sickly plant. And then out in the living room where I can open the drapes, I can see where the sunlight can come in. I notice that plant is doing great. So I come up with an idea. I wonder if plants grown in sunlight do a lot better than plants that are maybe grown without sunlight. Maybe that's the problem in my room with my plant. So I make some observations. I can see the differences there. I may do a little bit of research on seeing if anybody else has done an experiment, or just common knowledge on, do plants need light to grow well? And after I've done that, then I form a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is what I'm going to actually have you come up with. I'm going to tell you that what my question is, my problem is, I'm wondering, will plants in sunlight grow better than plants in the dark? So I want you now to come up with a hypothesis. I want you to come up with a good experiment. Remember all the things that we've talked about. Okay, as far as setting up an experiment, you want to have everything the same except one variable. One thing will be different on both of them. When I talk to you later then, after you've set up your experiment, I'll give you some pretend data, okay, that maybe we'll pretend that you had collected based on the experiment that you did. And then I want you to come up with a conclusion. So be watching for that very short video on, it's a little animation. It's really good. It's and it has to do with the hummingbird feeder. So it's actually a young girl who is doing an experiment on on hummingbird feeders to see if hummingbirds are attracted to a red colored hummingbird feeder. So thanks for watching. I'll be talking to you on the phone, and I hope that helps as you go through this lesson to kind of reinforce what you're learning. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.